Hey guys, Palsteron here. And today let's talk about the Path of Exile community, making builds for that community, being a part of it, and yeah, some takes that are basically very popular in the community that I just cannot agree with. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Before I want to talk about this post written by a certain someone called Jungroan. Just to preface this, I do highly respect Jungroan. I really like the quirky builds he comes up with on Softcore. They're really, really fun. Nowadays, he's more of a hardcore solo fund racer. He's also a bit of a memer, and basically the background of this post is that he kind of wanted to troll with it, but then when faced with criticism, he actually said that he believes in a lot of the points that he made here. So basically making big statements and then hiding behind the troll face because you were obviously just trolling and you don't actually care. That would be cringe. But believe it or not, this post has actually sparked a lot of discussion in the community. It's very interesting, and most of those discussions that were sparked were about scrutinizing build creators a little bit more, holding them to a higher standard, which is pretty ironic for somebody who wants to basically not get any scrutiny, and once he's faced with some he's basically saying, oh, it was just a troll, bro. But so in this video, I want to talk about 4 things. Number 1, I want to analyze the post and talk about some of the talking points that are made here. Even though it is kind of meant as a troll, it actually resonated with a lot of people. So some of those we're going to talk about. Number 2, shifting the blame. Number 3, infantilizing new players. And number 4, bad builds make good builds. Also, a few disclaimers at the start, just so people don't take me out of context. I do think build creators should be honest with their audiences. I think if they fail with a build, they should say so. I think people can learn something from that as well. I also think the build index does need updating. This is not what I'm talking about. If you don't know, I actually honestly did not even know there was a build index before this post, but there apparently is like an accumulation of like builds over the years, and they have not been updated regularly. So I did some research, and it does actually seem like there's some builds that definitely do need updating due to age. And I also want to say that RMT channels, basically these YouTube channels we all know that steal other people's content, try to repackage them, get people on RMT websites, are not part of this discussion because I don't think they actually belong to the community, although I am approximately 1 exalt away from actually talking about them. Now let's start with analyzing the post. Number 1, we really have to talk about this title here. If a League Starter Guide is not week 1 uber viable, it should not be on the build index. Now, if you're a softcore player and you are kind of confused by this very arbitrary goal that is in the title, what I can gather, this is actually not a troll from him. We have to talk about the hardcore softcore divide that's kind of happening here. And I had to make this explanation a little bit cookie cutter because obviously not everybody is going to fit into this umbrella who's playing on hardcore. That's why I also specifies racer. Most of them don't even realize this, but they're actually in a very, very big minority. Therefore, their criticism also comes from an extremely weird place. They want to teach new players stuff that they don't even need to know or don't even want to know. When it comes to goals, it's mostly complete the game as fast as possible without dying. And with complete the game, we can already see why the title is the way it is. It is Ubers, killing Ubers. That's a crazy goal in hardcore. If you can do that, you're a really, really skilled player, no matter what build you're using. Number 2, builds are mostly a tool to complete the game. What that basically means is whatever the best builds are, you're probably going to play. Maybe you have a little bit of leeway there. Maybe you play something that's a little bit worse, but you like playing. But mostly it's about character power. There are obviously exceptions to the rule. Playing hardcore is mechanically demanding. Therefore, hardcore players are more experienced on average, and there is less need for educational content. And then we have the softcore players, who are the majority of players. And the reason why there's a lot more points here, a lot more what builds are, what goals are, is mostly because you don't have the restriction of dying, which is a rough restriction for your builds. So softcore players' builds are, number 1, a tool to make currency. This is something that I think you have to tell hardcore players over and over and over again. Most people in softcore would like to toy around with currency. Those are the most clicked posts on YouTube for a reason. This is also why on hardcore you will see way more well-rounded builds, and in softcore you will see way more stuff that's all in on one thing. And he also addresses this in the post, and I think he's also very aware of this because he puts in specialized builds exempt, and down here again, other than specialized mappers, heisters, lab runners. So he is aware of that, but then we're going to talk about the subjectivity that is still in the post, even though he knows how vague his description is. But onto that in a second. Number 2 is a tool to have fun. Most people on Softcore are very casual. They come back from home. They maybe have a few hours to play. That is mostly what they want to do. They maybe complete the Atlas, right? There is obviously something there. builds are also about fun. They're an expression of creativity. Sometimes you just say, I want to make a build with this unique. It doesn't matter how good it is. I just want to make it as good as possible with that unique included. Same obviously also goes for skills. And number 4, it's also an obsession. The best build makers in this game are sitting in PoE quite a while. And they're usually on Softcore because Softcore gives you way more freedom to experiment. Now, whereas racers have a very straightforward goal, in Softcore, it's a lot different. And this is also one of the reasons why a lot of Softcore players, once they reach a certain point, they want to get to hardcore solo self-found because they feel like they've done it all. Now, number 1, they want to, once again, make currency and try out different farming strategies. That currency can then fuel into trying out a variety of builds or play styles. It's more about just like experiencing a minion build for the, I guess that was a bad example, but you know what I mean. Experiencing some kind of play style for the first time, maybe like a tornado shot with a headhunter or something. And you also want to use your currency in various ways. So as a payoff, you can do stuff like, for example, crafting projects. You're going to gamble it on stack decks or Watcher's Eyes, or you can make quirky builds. But obviously, there's also the people who, just as in hardcore, just want to complete the game. They finish everything. It's a lot easier than on hardcore, but maybe they just want to dip out after 2 weeks or something. They want to move on to other games. Maybe it's not their main game, whatever. And to end this, softcore players are less experienced on average. That has a lot of reasons. Obviously, with adversity comes higher skill level, higher mechanical skill level. For example, hardcore players definitely have that. And there's also the reason that most new players start in softcore, and therefore they need more educational content overall. And this is where a lot of friction comes from, because a ton of top content creators are actually hardcore players, and they will give you hardcore-based advice, which then maybe isn't the best when it comes to softcore economies, for example. And you can see this divide by mostly hardcore players actually telling their mostly softcore-based audience to play well-rounded builds, for example, good defense, good offense, basically excelling at nothing, which is a cozy feeling and worth a video of its own. But overall, on softcore, if you care about currency and you care about having stuff to make, I don't know, builds or do gambles, mostly it's about excelling at something. Killing Ubers on hardcore, great achievement. Killing Ubers on softcore, you don't really get anything from it. You can't really brag with it. It's basically just you drop no loot and you move on with your day. Now, to analyze the post a little bit further and talk about some overarching things, we have to talk about the very vague and subjective nature of this article, which is kind of trying to weirdly commit to a point, but then kind of doesn't. Because for some reason, this post thinks that being uber viable isn't a specialized build. For some reason, the majority of people just want to clear Ubers instead of 100 other goals that they might have. And he's just kind of like hanging it down there as if stuff like mappers or heisters or lab runners or MFers were like the minority that he just has to include. Now, to be fair to him, and going further into this, he's talking about league starters. And for league starters, it's a lot more feasible that you just want to complete stuff. You don't go into all of these things. But the thing is, Ubers, as we speak, do not have any value as completion. They're merely challenges, which has nothing to do with league starting. You don't get a favor slot. You don't get a watch stone or anything like that. So it's basically just a completely arbitrary goal. I'm looking further into the post. If you know him, you know that he's obviously memeing with this first paragraph. I was looking for a lot of POBs in the build index, and I found that a lot of the information there could be heavily misinforming for new players, which is very true. I guess the only thing I would say here is that he takes Ark as an example for newer players. Now, most newer players on softcore, believe it or not, from your point of view or your bubble, they just want to have like the RPG experience. They're like, Ark looks cool. And if you tell them, well, Ark isn't viable, they're like, but it's kind of zappy. So I'm not sure why everybody's doing this. I will talk about this later in the Infantalizing New Players sections. He goes on, many guides are lacking not from a strategic, subjective point of view, but simply making objectively incorrect decisions, which I do agree with. There is obviously numbers behind it, POBs behind it, and there are objectively better and worse builds, which excludes a lot of factors like people not always looking for the best possible builds, which is once again his hardcore solo self-found persona speaking. Now, next up, we have Grinding Gear is clearly investing into bringing new players into the game. I always appreciate a comedic relief somewhere in the post, but this is a perfect segue to get actually into my points here, and we will segue back to the article whenever needed. As I said, a lot of this is troll, but I will still take it out of context because I'm a little bitch. Now, shifting the blame is my first point. Most players have this very static thought of budget and what is considered to be a league starter, what can be league started, and what cannot be, when in reality it's actually highly subjective. Number one, misallocation of resources. the difference between one of the best players in the game having 10 exalts and some random player having 10 exalts is out of this world. People have 100 exalts to work with, and they just have to buy this 70x Watcher's Eye that gives them like an extra 15% attack speed. And even though you can provide players with a sort of like milestone system, a system where to tell them like a priority system, it is not always palpable, and it's mostly about game experience because they kind of have to adapt to certain situations. Trading skills are a big thing on Softcore trade, which is 90% or more of all people. That includes how to search for stuff and also using third-party websites. And the biggest factor is they just don't care about their build. They're like, give me the build, I'm gonna take your PoE, and it's gonna happen, right? They don't listen to anything anybody's saying. What I always say is I make builds for people who actually watch my guides. If you're good enough to do this, awesome. Most people aren't. So my question here would be, where is the player's responsibility in all of this? Why is this post and most posts on Reddit usually focused on the content creator side, especially when we all once were that player that was looking for knowledge, that was screwing up builds? Like, where is the empathy from the other side? And why are content creators playing into this, knowing exactly what they're doing? Making this game more hostile, not really on my top priorities, but to each their own. People will always fail and succeed no matter what the build is. It doesn't matter. Most of the time, no matter what you give a new player, they're going to fail in their first build. I've seen this time and time again, very often. No matter what you give a new player as a first try, they will probably fail. Then they will learn, adapt, get better at the game, which we're also going to talk about later. Failure, right? Which is a complete no-go, obviously. Now, obviously, the better the builds you give somebody, the more chance they have to succeed. But to make it seem like they're going to play an unoptimized build, they're missing 7% life from the passive tree because it isn't pathed correctly, and now all of a sudden they're going to quit the game, it's just silly. And then also, people will just overhype or like even underhype builds just because of who the build came from. Maybe they like the content creator, maybe they don't like it. So we just have a problem here of everything is kind of subjective, and posts like this are just feeding into the notion as though there's like kind of an objective view of all of this that we could all come to, which I think is intellectually dishonest, but to each their own. I would just like to ask people, where's your responsibility? If you take my build guide, you fuck up. I streamed it, I did it. What's your excuse? Especially want to highlight the question, why do people always think that these content creators who make one build or they oversell one build that people don't like, or that is like bad, why that is always connected to malevolence? We're all just players as well who sometimes sniff too much copium on their builds. If you think it's good, you committed to it, you made POBs for hours, and you're like, yeah, this is the next S tier league star, this is OP, right? And then incidents happen, like for example, Firegrass with Tornado Shot Poison, or Big Ducks with BFBB. I mean, it's really scary from a content creator perspective. There's a lot of psychos out there who will type you very nice messages on Discord. This will happen to me as well. The odds are against me. It always happens. Sometimes you just fuck up. You get hyped about something. It is what it is. And I will remind you whenever it's time for me, when the Reaper comes for me. Assuming perfection from a free product is ridiculous. Whether it's somebody who wants to do this full time, or whether somebody comes home from work and makes a one-take 30-minute video, they should not be held to ridiculous standards. So maybe think about this next time you type your paragraphs to most of these content creators who just want to make minimum wage with what they are passionate about. Now, number 2 point is the infantilizing of new players. This is something that is very, very predominant on Reddit, but also in the YouTube comments. The word bait builds are thrown around a lot, and there's obviously concern for that. We're going to talk about that. I just want to kind of like start from the top here. So number 1, new players are not small children, and content creators are not killing their families. The reason I say this is because there's some really strong wording on Reddit going around, and also in the YouTube comments, that is quite ridiculous. I've never seen anything to this extent in any other game, and I think it's mostly because PoE players are aware how hard the game is for new players, how obscure GGG makes it for them, and therefore just wants to bring them in. They try to get their IRL friends in 5 times in a row, and they just don't want to play it. Guess what? Content creators can't do all that much about that. They can put in more effort if they want to, but if GG makes the game harder and harder, you're going to have to invest more currency to clear certain things, right? Game knowledge is not a thing for a new player. All right, next up. New players do need well-curated content. Now, well-curated content is not the same as good builds or just meta builds. A mediocre build that is well presented is way more valuable for a new player than maybe the strongest build in the league just thrown in a PoB and a few notes. Most new players will not be able to leverage some of those really strong builds and mostly also don't care. Like I said earlier, they like how Fireball looks, they're gonna try out Fireball. They are probably going to fail. And I say that because people actually do not read disclaimers. No matter where you put them, do you put them in the first 10 seconds? A lot of people don't read it, go straight to the comments. They just wash over it. They're like, oh, is this 500 Exalt build league start viable? You don't have any semblance of league start anywhere in the title, anywhere in the text. It doesn't matter. People will always find a way to misinterpret your content. So I guess another question for me would be, what is the problem with failure in general? Where does that come from? That is literally how you learn the game. That is how you become good at the game. You try out new things, you don't succeed, you learn why, you move on. There's a huge difference between providing new players with good information and coddling them to the point where, oh, they can't feel, otherwise they move on to Lost Ark. And at the end here, something that new players do need protected from is RMT and related YouTube and websites. A lot of PoE related key phrases will give you a RMT website as the first website, which basically means that a new player who has no relation to the community will never know that this is against TOS. Therefore, this should be a huge focus, maybe a little bit more than chastising random people who just want to make builds because they want to have fun and share it with the community. Now, number 3 is not really related to this post, but I still wanted to include it here. Bad builds make good builds. So believe it or not, meta builds or good builds, what you would call them in general, develop over time. Very rarely does somebody just wake up, have a stroke of genius, and first try make a perfect or really, really strong meta build. Usually what happens, even if they have a good version, it gets improved over time. And very often what happens is some of the more creative people are maybe not as good at min-maxing them. Because min-maxing builds is a very different skill set to actually coming up with new builds. And that is why the build economy needs bad builds. Wherever you get your inspiration from, the top build makers, that is not just content creators, just to put that out there, need stuff like that to get inspiration from. PoE Ninja, YouTube, Twitch, the forums, wherever. The more bad builds are out there, the more content that people can consume and maybe come up with a better package for some kind of idea. And while I don't think these bad builds should necessarily be presented to a new player in particular, I don't know where you would draw the line. Like, where does it stop, right? It definitely doesn't stop at uber viable or something. And that plays into, guys, it's okay that some people make low quality builds or low quality content. In fact, PoE has some crazy content for seeing how little people can actually make a living off of it. People are just very passionate about the game. So no shit, you're gonna see stuff like one takes or just not optimized builds. Some of the scrutiny that some of these content creators get is just kind of crazy. But at the end of the day, whatever. We have less meme builds overall, which is a kind of product of stuff like this. Basically, trying to make builds into more of a tool, right? So from some of the top content creators, which are very good players at the game, who will inevitably end up in hardcore solos, I found, as racers, their goal is to complete the game as fast as possible, which is very different from what most people want out of this game. I don't care about their min-max seismic trap. I actually give zero fucks. If somebody makes like a cool fulcrum build, I'm in. If somebody makes a cool build with Story of the Val, I'm in. That's what I personally want. I know that's what a lot of people want. And some other people will care about Seismic Trap and they will have that content at their disposal. So how about we stop pretending like this game is fucking Witcher 3 and we need to play through it as fast as possible. And I guess in conclusion, first thing I gotta say is I don't make Jungroan responsible for like stirring the fire or whatever of the community. I think it's sad that we have a fire to begin with that is there to stir. And even though Jungroan is self-proclaimed not a guide maker and he just pushes out cool build ideas, makes clips, stuff like that, still I would like to have a little bit of self-awareness when it comes to other people who actually put in the time. And this does not just go for Jungroan, but for a lot of streamers who think they have very big insights into content creation, which they don't. They're sitting in front of PC all day, making basically no effort to help the community. They will talk about the new player experience and they will talk about how bad other people's content is, but they will never sit down and actually write a single word in a script. Spoiler alert, no PoB you ever make does anything for a new player. It doesn't matter how good it is. It's mostly about bringing that to new players, teaching them about that stuff. And even if some of those people do not have as much experience as you at the game, they don't play since beta, they still contribute way more to the community overall than you ever will. But with that said, can we just be nicer to each other and maybe even a little bit more respectful? Like, my average age on my YouTube channel and my Twitch is in, like, you guys are in your 30s on average. Like, can I just promise that I'm gonna be less of a bitch and you do the same? I don't know. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. Number two, can somebody take responsibility if they screw up builds? If you get a recipe from a really good chef, I'm pretty sure you would not really think that you would just replicate that one-to-one. You're gonna miss a little bit of salt here. You're gonna buy the wrong pepper. You bought the wrong herbs because the one you wanted weren't available at the supermarket. The top players in this game can do stuff with the same gear that you have that you wouldn't even dream of with the same amount of currency invested. They know how to allocate it. This is not just black and white. You can do this and this for 5 or for 10 exalts. Not how it works. Something like budget is a very weird concept. And I also like if we can just stop pretending like new players are 3 years old that need protection from these bad arc and fireball builds. I think we're often way too pragmatic with builds. Forget that this is actually a game. Most players do not play this game for a living. I don't think people need to be ostracized if they're just making a build, maybe overhyping it because they're hyped themselves. Most people on YouTube are not malevolent. Most people on Twitch are not malevolent. Obviously, exclude RMT websites from this because fuck them. However, I love the PoE community overall. Everything I just said is criticism. There's a lot of things to be loved about this game. I love how everybody's so interested in everything. People are so passionate, which can bring out the best, but also the worst in people. This time I highlighted the worst, but there's obviously a lot of good things to say about this here. And once again, this article was just like a catalyst. This article is obviously not the main problem. I hope you could take away something from this video, and see ya.